What's going on, people? We're going live again on Monday morning. Perhaps we'll be back to a regularly scheduled time slot by next week. But for now, we are back, myself and Luke, to recap Lost on Talkin Lost. Today's episode, we are talking about Season 1, Episode 9 or 10, depending on how you count the pilot, Raised by Another. Not only do we finally get to see some backstory on Claire and her origin as far as how she came to be on the island, but we also get probably the most supernatural episode, and spooky feeling episode, if you will. I think it's kind of perfect that we're recapping this episode only a few days before Halloween, for perhaps probably the spookiest and scariest episode, probably the most interesting cliffhanger also so far for any episode that we've got so far of the show. Luke, you ready? You ready to recap this?
Yeah, I was surprised it took this long to get like a real cliffhanger type ending to an episode, because I feel like that used to be such a standard for TV.
Yeah.
At some point.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we're gonna break all of that down on today's episode of Talkin Lost. Stay tuned. All right, Season 1, Episode 10, Raised by Another. So this is the episode where we get Claire's backstory as well. And what's it called? So obviously, like I said, we've talked a lot, characters, backstories, all that good stuff. But I think what's probably the most interesting here is this is where we really start to get like into kind of, I would say, the next layer of Lost. You know, we talked about that last week with Saeed's episode, Solitary, and how that was a very crucially important episode as far as that being the first one where we started to discover that they are not alone on the island. And this is the episode where it really starts to take effect, where all at once, when you think there's another spooky supernatural event that's happening just inside someone's head. In this case, the idea of Claire, who's having several nightmares about her unborn baby being attacked, and all kind of conjoins together with the revelation at the end that somebody among the survivors may or may not be who they seem. So before we get into that, Luke, what did you think of the episode overall?
It was a good episode. I could feel the angst of the whole situation. You're having someone pregnant on the island. That's a whole nother problem they have to deal with. And the backstory as well. I just love seeing the backstory of all these characters, learning to know them. You mentioned it is a spooky one with the dreams, or are they dreams, or is it a Stephen King type thing where the place has its own sentience and is playing on the vulnerable minds of the survivors. So yeah, and of course the ending, you know, they kept showing that guy. I'm like, I haven't seen this guy before. Like, they keep showing him a lot.
Well, so he pops up, this being the character of Ethan, who, funnily enough, actually, I don't know if you recognize that actor, if he looks familiar. That's William Mapother. Yeah, so the actor's name is William Mapother, and while that name may not mean anything,
the last name means something.
The last name he does. He's one Tom Cruise's cousin. So that's and he's popped up in a couple things. I remember the first time I saw this, I'm like, why does that guy look so familiar? And then I saw like a Watch Mojo video a couple weeks later being like, William Apather and Tom Cruise as far as like unlikely celebrity pairings or something like that. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'm like, I wouldn't have, it's one of those things where I wouldn't have put the connection together immediately, but once you pointed out, it kind of makes sense. And so Ethan, the character of Ethan, popped up only in last week's episode as part of Locke's, like he was helping Locke out with something. And what's so interesting, obviously, about this episode as well is, besides it being a Claire backstory, it's kind of a crucially important episode for Hurley, because Hurley kind of proves himself to be like the unknown, like, secret power player. Because even though Jack technically is filling out the leader role as the doctor taking care of everybody, obviously, after Claire wakes up from the initial nightmare, as far as the events that set off the episode, it really is kind of Hurley that is the one that ends up like kind of carrying the trajectory of the plot, figuring things out, and by the end realizing that Ethan was not on the plane with them. And obviously, again, the reason why this is so important, tying it with Saeed's journey from last episode and his interactions with Russo, is because Russo, like I said, was the first confirmation, but Russo confirms that there are others on the island. And while what's it called? And while the others have become like a very significant part of Lost lore, this is our first like evidence of seeing them. The idea of there are other people on this island that may or may not have infiltrated groups of people who have crash landed on the island before. For what sinister purposes will be revealed. But obviously, like I said, the episode kicks off with Claire having this awful, awful nightmare. She's wandering in the jungle. She's randomly not pregnant anymore. First, she runs into Locke, who gives this mysterious cryptic message. And when he looks up at her, he has these mysterious black and white stones for his eyes. Then she turns around when she hears Aaron crying. And she goes up to find a crib in the woods. Uncovers the blankets in it and sees nothing but a puddle of blood before waking up screaming, only to be comforted by Jack and Charlie. And they're kind of trying to figure out, like, okay, was she really in danger? Is the island trying to warn her? Before there's a second nightmare in which she thinks that she's being attacked and injected with something. So, yeah, it's pretty freaky opening, honestly, to say the least. It's definitely hectic. It's scary. It's embellishing because, again, we kind of gone through every character up until this point, their flaws and everything, and we covered in the pilot as well how interesting it was that Lindelof was kind of had a lot of foresight in terms of bringing modern day 21st century struggles to being stranded on a desert island. Like, what would happen if you were addicted to drugs and were stranded on a desert island? If you were paralyzed and on an island? If you were all of these different things, you know, if you had cancer, right? Going back to Rose and Bernard, or just Rose rather. And now it's a situation of where, what if you were pregnant, specifically very close to giving birth on a desert island? But what's even more interesting than that is, probably of all of the character backstories we've gotten probably since Locke, Claire's is the first one since Locke's, I would say, that involves some supernatural stuff going on before she arrived on the island. Because the thing about, and the thing that I would say that differentiates it is that Locke, nothing mysterious or supernatural happened to him until he reached the island. Claire, there seems to be some supernatural things happening before she gets to the island, as we see in her backstory. But Luke, let me ask you something. Before, obviously, the end of this episode, did you think that Claire was actually being attacked, or did you think that it was yet another one of the island's mysterious hijinks, you know, and messing around with that? Because we know that wouldn't have been the first time that had happened.
I was conflicted. Like, it could be either way. I guess I don't know enough about the island to make a concrete judgment on that. I thought it may have been just like a freaky dream, but I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's always hard to say with the island, you know, like I said, but with all the crazy things that you don't know what's real or not. Jack seeing his dad, obviously, Locke mysteriously regaining his ability to walk and all that. But I guess also what's so freaky about this is, up until this point, we haven't really had a confirmation, obviously, that anything on the island that we've been seeing is real. But now, obviously, with the revelation of Ethan being one of the others, and who I believe that that's who they start referring to them as in this season. What's so scary is that about the others, at least this early on in the show's run, is that really how they were kind of able to just really blend in with the island, where they knew the island so well that they're able to kind of come and go to the point where you may think that they're supernatural or not, you know? And it's really not until later on that you actually do get confirmation, no, they are real, and they have been living on this island for a very long time. So that's kind of it. So as far as the rest of the plot goes, like I said, this ends up kind of being a pretty intricate plot where Jack isn't quite sure whether Claire's telling the truth or not. Charlie, of course, who's falling head over heels for her, is pretty obvious is trying to help her, but maybe getting a little bit too involved for his own good. Hurley, however, of course, decides to go in the complete opposite direction, where he's like, look, where Claire's potential attack causes him to go like, listen, again, the unexpected voice of reason, where he's like, listen, none of us really know each other that well, so we should probably like take some sort of a census in order to figure out like if any of us are crazy, you know? He's like, and he even points out, he's like, dude, my name's not even Hurley, it's Hugo Reyes, but that's just a nickname that kind of stuck, you know? So once again, kind of exploring these character dynamics. And I think the thing I love about this is that, again, one would be remiss to think of Hurley as anything other than, like, you know, the funny best friend ultimately. But this is showing that, like, no, there's more to Hurley than meets the eye. He's actually wickedly smart. And as we'll see, it is quite interesting that the show deliberately waits until later on, almost to the end of the first season, before revealing Hugo/Hurley's backstory, as far as as far as how he came to be on the island. But so he decides to go forward and take this census among the survivors. What's it called? And meanwhile, we get into Claire's backstory, which, so of course, it's another classic case of unplanned pregnancy, but of course, she's with the wrong guy. What's it called? Artist who is unsure of what to do. I don't know about you, Luke, but like every time a guy says, "Oh, well, these things aren't always accurate about a pregnancy test," I'm always like, "Yeah, dump that guy. Get rid of him immediately."
Yeah, just leave.
Like, sorry, anybody who's dumb enough to actually say something like that is clearly not worthy of being with. But, so of course he says that. Claire goes with her friend to. At first he's like all for it. He's like, "Yeah, we can do it. We can actually like be adults and raise the kid." And then Claire goes
my paintings,
exactly. My paintings.
Like,
so important.
Sure.
It's like, all right, buddy. All right. So Claire goes with her friend to see a psychic, who has a reading that's apparently so overwhelming that he asks her to leave, and he can't even take her money. He's like, "Please leave." So she goes back. She's living with this guy. Of course, the guy has cold feet, ends up bouncing. What's it called? Claire tries to go back to the psychic. The psychic gives her a reading and tells her that what's it called? Under no circumstances can she give the baby away. She has to raise the baby. That's the big thing that's revealed here. And again, I'm gonna try and avoid stuff going forward, but it's as the episode progresses, as far as how this flashback goes, it becomes beyond clear that the psychic foresaw her crash landing on the island ultimately. And what's it called? And as far as the show continuing to hint at the kind of overall presence of the island and what it's capable of, it really is almost like it is becoming like this living, breathing force, almost, if you will. So what was your take on the psychic's reading of Claire?
Yeah, I'm not one to really believe in psychics, but hey, it's Lost. I guess anything can happen, or at least I don't know the possibilities of what can happen. So yeah, I thought maybe it is the island, sort of say, reaching out, extending its power on people, sort of selecting Claire to come to the island in some way. So I'm wondering to see if that aspect of the mythology is developed further.
It is rather curious as far as that goes, especially given obviously the revelation that happens at the end. But yeah, Damon Lindelof, that psychics and really people's potential connection to the supernatural, the unknown, the dead, what have you. Because that's another idea that he explores in his follow-up show, The Leftovers, where also the ability of not only psychics, but people's skepticism towards psychics and supernatural forces. Because obviously, like I said, we once again have Jack playing a little bit of the skeptic, where even though Jack has been one of the earliest people shown the, what's it called? Who has been shown the power of the island, he has been want to reject it. Ultimately, time and time again. Obviously, while there are others like Locke who have embraced it, but like I said,
I want to mention Locke real quick. He has
yes.
like it's not a Locke episode. He has like 2 or 3 lines, but they're the best lines of the whole episode. And like Hurley asked him, "Did you find it?" "No, it found me." She's like, "Oh,
yes." That whole interaction was great. And Hurley's reaction after he leaves, he's like, "I know I already asked you about your information. I'm just walking with you because I don't want to keep talking to him." He's like, that kind of creeped me out. I thought that was really funny. Yeah, Hurley's little interactions with everybody are quite informative, obviously. But yeah, and the biggest thing too is that he's like, and when he asks Hurley, he's like, who's keeping track of you? And he's like, "Me?" And he's like, that was a joke. It's like, it's good. I love how Locke just like is instantly a great judge of character. It's great. So anyways, so obviously Claire is, so Jack is trying to give Claire medicine potentially because he thinks that the dreams are anxiety based, and especially because he doesn't want to potentially trigger an early labor, which would not be a good idea on a desert island without proper medical equipment. He's like, we want this birth to be as natural as possible. Claire, of course, rejects it because in her mind, she's like, yeah, this is real. This is happening to me. Charlie, of course, believes her. She starts to leave the caves and head back towards the beach. Immediately starts contracting because, of course, this is what happens every single time you have a pregnant woman. Every single time you have a pregnant woman, and something you're like, okay, she will inevitably, especially this far along, I'm like, okay, she will inevitably give birth, because there's always going to be a source of drama around when she gives birth. She's never going to be in the right time at the right place, and obviously it's going to create a lot of, pandemonium, and it works both dramatically, and it's one of those few story devices that works both dramatically and comedically. So meanwhile, we flash back again. After the psychic tells Claire that she has to keep the baby, she attempts to put the baby up for adoption with who seem like a very nice couple that are going to pay her a lot of money. The only trade-off is that she'll never be able to see the baby again. And then what happens when she tries to go and sign the papers? The pens do not have ink in them. So, Luke, how much are we reading into the pens not having ink? Is this is this the island messing, or is this just a classic case of every pen you try to write having no ink in it, which is a very common thing that's happened to a lot of people before? But it is one of those interesting story elements where you point out like little micro things. If it's like, oh, the pen not working every time you try to write it, the automatic door's not opening until you get like really, really close, if that, and maybe pointing out that it may be like random acts of God. I know that season 3 of Fargo was also trying to play around with this as well, but what are we thinking? Do these pens just not have ink, or is this some more supernatural island spookiness happening?
No, absolutely. If I do just call back to another Stephen King book, 11/22/63, this guy has to try and save JFK from being assassinated, and things are on the day. Things are being thrown in his way to try and stop him. Like there's a car accident, there's a traffic jam. So just that aspect of it, like ordinary everyday things, just stopping you from doing what you want to do when there's a greater force that's keeping you from doing these things. So I think there's definitely something there, and it's not just a leaky pen. I rarely have a pen fail on me. So
yeah, I've been having it happen a little bit more frequently, but I don't know. Maybe the island's trying to reach out to me, but I haven't been on a plane in a while, nor am I getting on a plane to go to a specific part of the world anyway. So I think I'm good there. But who knows? Maybe when I eventually go to Southeast Asia, you may never hear from me again. Who knows? But yeah. So obviously we cut back to Claire revisits the psychic, and the big thing that happens now, the big ol' switcheroo, if you will, is the psychic gives Claire a ticket to Australia, saying, I found a lovely couple in Los Angeles that's willing to adopt your baby. Here's $6,000. You'll get the other 6 when you hit LA, and it has to be on this flight, Oceanic Flight 815. And obviously, we know what happens next. But obviously, back on the island, Claire's in the jungle, starts contracting. Charlie runs to try and get Jack, runs into Ethan, asks Ethan to go and get Jack. Ethan also appeared earlier in the episode when Hurley got his information. What's it called?
Did he mistake his name for someone else, like Lance or something?
They thought he was somebody else. Which I thought was funny. And he's like, oh yeah, that guy is, the short guy with the red hair. And Ethan claims he's from Canada. He may very well have been from Canada before he came to the island. But what was I just gonna say? But obviously, back with Charlie and Claire. Claire starts contracting. She tells Charlie the story of everything that happened with the psychic. And that's when Charlie brings up the idea of maybe the psychic saw the island. And he's like, I do believe that some people have the gift, and if they do, what's it called? And if they do, he clearly knew it, because if he wanted, if he wanted you here, and that's when the light bulb kind of goes on in Claire's head, the source for anxiety, if you will. But she's like, oh my God, he did see it. He knew there never was a couple in Los Angeles. Like, he did this to get me on this island, to make sure that I would kind of be forced to raise the kid on his own, which, oh man, I don't know if you want to get into like the moral deliberations of psychics right now. If the idea of forcing Claire to raise this kid was to make sure that she got stranded on a desert island, especially given that he had such a negative reaction and wasn't willing to tell her reading in the first place. So I'm questioning the logic here a little bit. I don't know if that threw you off for a bit.
I figured, okay, I just got to keep watching and see what the big reason is why she has to raise this kid. So yeah, I'll leave that one to the future episodes.
Yeah, that one I'll have to leave to the rewatch as well once we get further along and figure out, obviously, what's it called, which whether or not that kind of does add up and make sense or not. But so the flashbacks get wrapped up. Claire's contractions seem seem to stop. Everything seems to be back to normal with them. Her arc seems to be resolved. But unfortunately, things get hairy as Hurley is directed to the manifest by Boone and Shannon, who, of course, Sawyer has. And Hurley does a pretty good job of manipulating Sawyer into giving him the manifest. Once again, really, this is low-key like a Hurley episode, power player-wise, because he seamlessly manages to convince Sawyer to give him the manifest by saying that he could really use the points right now. And what's it called? Sawyer like easily gives it up. Why do you think
he's just relaxing on the beach?
Sawyer's like, I don't want any more trouble. I don't actually stand to gain anything by having the manifest. I can clearly tell, like, you seem to actually have a legit reason. You know, you're not Jack or Kate, who I seem to have, like, or Saeed, who I seem to have major problems with. You can take it. Go ahead. Saeed wanders out of the jungle. He makes it back to the caves. Still with the bullet wound in his leg. Jack is treating him. What's it called? Saeed is like, Saeed confirms his meeting with Russo and the confirmation that they're not alone on the island. At perfect timing, Hurley runs into the cave with the manifest, having compared his senses to the manifest. And he's saying that while there are only 46 names on the flight manifest, there's 47 names on his census that he's taken of everybody on the island, revealing that, of course, one person was not on the plane. And conveniently cut to Ethan greeting Charlie and Claire before the episode cuts to black.
Yeah,
Perfect cliffhanger ending.
They were showing him far too much for him to not imagine.
Yes.
I've seen enough TV. Like I've not seen
Yes.
as much TV as you, but I've seen enough to know.
You're
to
like,
see the
I've seen
signs.
enough to know the signs, if you will. Another potential supernatural movie that questions whether or not the supernatural thing is real. But one of the lesser Shyamalan endings. So, man, what our first true cliffhanger ending, as far as gonna lead directly into next week. All that I'm gonna say is that, yeah, things are only getting started. We're past the build-up phase now. Now we're really getting into some of the island mysteries and some of the real juicy stuff, you know? So next week when we come back, it'll be another Jack backstory with, I believe, all the best cowboys have daddy issues. What's it called? So we'll be doing that next week. No movie reviews this week. I saw Conclave this weekend. It was boring. It's not worth talking about. Boring.
I saw Venom. It wasn't great, as expected.
Yeah, it didn't look like it was going to be good. I'll watch
But I finished
that at some point.
Arcane.
Oh shit! So you're all caught up.
It's like the best thing ever.
It's the
Like,
greatest thing ever, right? You're all caught up for season 2. That's good. That ending, man. Whoo boy! That was a crazy ending, to say the least.
And I started watching Daredevil because I haven't seen it, and the new season.
Yeah,
or
March
reboot,
4th.
whatever it is,
March
coming
4th,
out. So.
officially confirmed at New York Comic Con. So, yeah, we're only just getting started. Next week, like I said, we have all the best cowboys have daddy issues. And as far as Oscar reviews, I believe so. A Real Pain goes wide next week. Are you guys getting that?
I don't think so.
Okay, the Jesse
We
Eisenberg
get
one with
Anora
Kieran
in 2
Culkin.
weeks. I'm
Okay,
watching that.
All right, so at the very least,
Actually, no, we get
your thoughts on that.
We get it this week.
Oh shit, you're getting it this
Whatever.
week. Nice.
Maybe,
Yeah,
I'll see. It's within the 2 weeks.
All right, that'll be good. And then, what's it called? Yeah, I believe the only movies that are coming out next week are Robert Zemeckis is Here, which looks interesting to say the least. It looks like his take on a Terrence Malick movie, and Juror Number 2, the more than likely final film from Clint Eastwood. So I'll probably be recapping both of those next week, but we'll get into some more juicy stuff the week after, which is, I believe, when we get. Hold on, let me check my schedule. The week after. Oh, we also get Blitz opening next weekend. That opens at theaters next weekend, and then the following weekend we'll talk about Arcane season 2, and then the weekend after that, the weekend before Thanksgiving, it will be Amelia Perez and Heretic. But with all that being said, Luke, thank you once again for joining me for another episode of Talkin' Lost. Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
You know, this week I'm gonna plug my Goodreads. Just to switch things up, it's goodreads.com/LucasML. So you can check out what I'm reading there.
Interesting. So is that like the letterbox for books?
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice. I'm definitely gonna have.
There's
to
a
get
letterbox
that
for
too.
everything.
There really is now. It's
music,
great.
games.
There really
everything.
is now. It's incredible. And of course, you guys can follow me with everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talkin' TV Podcast across all platforms. Be sure to subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitch. This episode will be available later today on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And as always, people, 12 seasons of a short film and watch more fucking movies. And in this case, Lost. We'll see you guys next week.